if we are automating a lot of the more grunt work in business, we're taking away the learning process from junior level employees.
Well, I'm here today with Jo McKinney, and what a day to be talking to you because already today I've had half a dozen questions that you would know how to answer and I don't.
I hope
Uh,
so.
I loved you on stage with Allison Moore, the chief of Chief, an organization you're a founding member of. Allison's a friend and she's terrific. And I saw you on stage with her at Economy 25 just a few weeks ago, and you were really, really good. And I had lunch a little while ago, and someone said to me, "Did you see the article in the Journal today about AI is about to empty Madison Avenue?" And I said, "As a matter of fact, I did." And I'm so old school that I had a print copy and I tore out the article to chat
There it
with you
is.
about today.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
Okay.
so maybe we'll start with something easy. Is AI about to empty out Madison Avenue?
Gosh, I think there's a lot of people in advertising going through a bit of an existential crisis right now. But some of that crisis is probably more of a result of legacy problems with the business model in the advertising agency business. Um, I think there's a lot of change that's coming, obviously, to service-based businesses, creativity in general, and major changes in marketing that are happening. And a lot of them certainly are being accelerated and fueled by AI and transformation that's happening in that space. Whether or not long term this is a replacement for creative minds, no, I don't think so. I think that humans do really great human work and we have judgment and creativity. I think there are a lot of ways that people are going to need to rethink the way they do their work and the way they collaborate. But I don't see a world where humans are replaced fully in creative processes by AI.
That would be my guess too, Joe, although you would know a lot better than me. But it just seems to me everything about the marketing world is going to change. How you do creative, how you think about the customers, how you test things, focus groups. I heard you back last month talk about how research is changing so quickly. So tell us, at the Board of Innovation, where you are now, how do you think about all these changes? How do you try and help your clients to position themselves to take advantage of all this change that is coming our way? And what is the mandate of Board of Innovation?
So, Board of Innovation is a really interesting company. It's been around for a while, and at its heart and root, it was an innovation company. And a few years ago, I think took an early starter attitude towards AI and really saw the writing on the wall in terms of how could we lean into AI and think about how we could lead strategically and in capability building with the kind of companies we've been partnering with for years as in innovation work streams. And so a lot of the early work that was done was really around helping people think about innovation process through generative AI. But what really has happened, I would say, over the last few years, we've had the opportunity to partner with a lot of large and diverse types of companies, global companies, many Fortune 500 companies in diverse industries. And it's really, I think, focused our mindset pretty dramatically around moving the clients that we collaborate with beyond thinking about AI for efficiency to thinking about AI for growth. And how do you really lean into your competitive advantages to find ways to drive growth that benefits everyone, not just a few people at the top in the company through those kind of strategies. So we do a lot of work on the strategic side of that, looking at all the levers of growth. It's not just about the technology, it's about the human equation and what does it take to be more AI native as an organization, and then building out some of those capabilities, proprietary capabilities that allow the clients that we work with to think about leveraging their data, leveraging their equities, leveraging their human capabilities in ways that perhaps they could not leverage before. We're really working towards more of a superhuman model. We're not really focused on replacing humans with AI. It's really about powering people in the ways of working in new ways.
So the way we think about AI is two ways, and you may suggest there's more. But I think of the first thing you mentioned, which is efficiencies, and that's something that's easy for us to comprehend. You don't need 14 lawyers anymore because if you're not reviewing contracts for 2 or 3 days at a time, and that can be AI processed, you're going to save a lot of time, so you can do it with fewer people. Finance, I can understand that you can do ledger easier, better, faster. So I can understand the efficiency sides of AI. But then there's the greater opportunity, which is what I would call capabilities. And I think that's what you were just alluding to. Uh, and especially in your world in marketing, I can understand that if we photograph a beautiful floral arrangement in our studio, once we have that image using AI tools, now we don't have to shoot that 20 or 30 times. We could change the setting it's in. We could change the table it's on. We could change whether or not people are in the shot or not. All of that's done after you capture the initial image, whereas before you'd have to change sets to do that and introduce new people and hire models. So that's efficiencies. But when I think of capabilities, if I could personalize a message to you and find out that, Joe, you have a really tight knit group of about 7 or 8 gal friends, and I can remind you about when their birthdays are, suggest a message you might want to send to one of them because you've shared with us that your relationship with Diane used to be very strong, but with your career path, you're not as connected, and you've made a resolution this year that you wanted to get closer to Diane. And I can remind you that you really haven't corresponded with Diane. And I just read that she just got a promotion in her job, and it might be an opportune time for you to send her a note. That's very light, but more down the path of capabilities.
Well, and you're talking exactly about how do you leverage what you know, the data that you have, to create a more hyper personalized, we've been calling it moments. Momentization is sort of a term that we've heard a lot in the last year, that how you could find that aperture moment, that aperture incidents, and align your brand to that. But I think you mentioned something really interesting, Jim, when you talk about efficiency versus some of these larger transformation ideas. The way we like to think about it at BOI, and we've gone back and we've looked at every major technological advancement over the last 100 years, right? From the steam engine to GPS technology to mobile technology to the internet. And I know you've led a company that has innovated at every stage of that transformation. We looked at all of these and we said these are all general purpose technologies, over time, right? They're available across the spectrum. And how did they evolve, right? And so wave one transformation is when you apply that technology for efficiency's sake. How can I take it and apply it to the way I'm currently working to potentially make it more efficient? Wave two transformation across all these technological advancements has been around efficiency, but also, let's say, safety. So maybe the automobile replaced the horse. Wave two transformation, we learned how to mass produce them safely and give them seatbelts, right? But wave three transformation, which is where a lot of our work is and where I really try to encourage my client partners to think, is when you stop applying the new general purpose technology to your existing ways of working, and instead you reimagine a whole new business model, whole new way to grow that's powered by that in a whole new way. So I would say the third wave transformation, let's say, of the automobile was maybe the suburbs, right? It gave rise to the fact that people could live and work in different locations. Now, when you're in wave one and replacing the horse with a car, you're probably not thinking about that wave three. But what we're finding in our work is that today, companies need to be making equal investments in wave one, wave two, and wave three, because being good at wave one doesn't mean you're going to be good at wave three transformation. And in fact, Jim, if you look at the last couple of years of companies embracing generative AI, which really is where people have been, we're moving towards more agentic AI now, but people really applying it to their existing ways of working, and lots of pilots and confusion around the human piece in that, and have we retrained people? Do they know how to even use these technologies that we're throwing at them? That's been a lot of the energy that you see across a lot of companies. But where you really can do something more interesting and where you could lean into your competitive advantages and years of competitive advantages are in wave three, where you really have to be open-minded to kind of blowing up the business model a bit. Because I would argue that if you really let yourself go down the transformation journey here and you think about, okay, generative AI to agentic AI to more autonomous systems that potentially work with humans and maybe work separate and independently of humans at times, what would that mean to the industry I'm in? And actually, one of the reasons I got excited about 1-800-Flowers in many ways is because it is a great example of a business model that has adapted and changed with each wave of technology, but it has the ability to be a highly personalized, highly momentized business in a way that some industries don't, right? So when you think about leveraging the benefits of AI and becoming more of an AI native organization and how we work and moving beyond efficiency and thinking about a whole new operating model for growth, um, this type of business that you founded is one that I think is there's a lot of exciting things to come. And things that don't necessarily mean we're replacing humans on the team. I think it really means we're actually rethinking the business model because we're preparing for a world where we have agents who are going to buy and we have humans that are going to buy. And right now we've spent the last how many years perfecting our ability to market to humans, to get them to choose, decide, but we have a whole new audience.
Well, I found myself just this morning, Joe, saying to myself, I'm so comfortable with my ChatGPT assistant now that I'm wishing it would be agentic. So I'm already yearning for them to introduce the next productization that makes my assistant more usable. I
Yeah,
did
the
some.
consumer behavior has really advanced. Also, it was really interesting. I think they
That's
said,
just in the last couple of weeks for me.
right, holiday shopping this year. I think they've the stat, and I did a webinar on this a couple of weeks ago. I should have the stat in front of me. I think it was like 50% of Americans are saying they're very comfortable with the idea of shopping in the chat of ChatGPT. And I think there are certain categories where all of us would like more autonomous purchases, right? There's some where we want to be in the loop and some where we probably don't. But there's certainly a lot of change coming. And I think brands that decide early that there is reason to make themselves attractive in that answer economy, I think stand to benefit, right?
Well, I can tell you that my grandkids already have a very strong relationship with
Yeah,
Alexa rather.
Alexa, yeah.
Um,
And that's an
and
early example, right?
but now they've introduced agentic AI into Alexa, haven't they?
Yeah, I think Alexa, I would say, is one of the early stomping grounds of things that feel more autonomous because there are auto refills, auto cart filling. Instacart is doing that as well. If you look at kind of the journey of more autonomous agentic work, like things that would happen without humans around, and even agent to agent negotiations, we're still not quite there yet. Like a lot of that is happening more in controlled environments right now. There's agent human interactions, and it's becoming more autonomous, but it's not autonomous yet.
Well, I'm proud to tell you, Joe, that I have a son I mentioned whose son I visited Saturday, the 7-year-old using Perplexity to build his business plan. Uh, I'm proud to tell you that my son, who's in his 40s now, uh, he and I have had discussion all of this past year about the fact that he was a brand manager for us. He ran several small brands for us. And I convinced him, or I contributed to his group think about he's still young enough to be, even though he's an old dog, to learn new tricks. And he switched careers and moved over. We hired a chief AI officer. And he went over and said, geez, you're going to need someone who knows the company. I'm raising my hand. And so he gave up what he was doing, handed it off to other people, and has now just dunked his head in AI. And obviously it's worked for his son, but it's also working for the people in his company. And I think I couldn't give that advice to enough people, that this is so important and so life-changing for all of us in every way I can think of, that why shouldn't you? So that begs a question. I was chatting with a young lady the other day. She was at the event you were at. She was very interested in your conversation. But here she is. She's a French minor and an international business major. And she's graduating this month. And going right on for a master's. And I said, what AI classes have you taken? She said, I haven't taken any. I said, you cannot leave school without understanding how AI changes things. You have to understand the new technology. Was that good advice for her?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I think everyone should be well versed on what's going on. I don't know, people ask me all the time, like, what course should they take? This is more like professionals asking me that question. And I always say, actually, I would say lean into what you know as a human. That's the most important course, right? Like, what do I know about great human work in my area of expertise? And how might I learn enough about what the capabilities are right now of whether it's generative AI or ultimately agentic AI, and think about how I could apply that to what I already know. So for sure, I think people need to, just like any general use technology, you need to know your way around it in order to be able to be creative with it and think about how it might influence your work. So for sure, I think that was good advice. I think though, the practical hands-on usage maybe is even more transformational right now than a course. Look, everyone has very different learning styles, and I know there's a lot of people who feel, I know a lot of people like in deep into their careers who have taken these courses over the last couple of years where they've gone and done a weekend course or a night class online with a university around understanding AI. But a lot of it is more tactical stuff, like they're learning how to prompt or things like that, versus I think the opposite, which is like, how do I think about the work that I do and what might I reimagine about that work in light of the capabilities of a new technology, which I think in work at least is maybe the more interesting question for people to ask. So maybe for her in her chosen field, the most interesting thing might be, what are the legacy ways of working in that field, and how might I, as a newcomer, completely reimagine them through the lens. I know a lot of people who are between jobs right now. There's been a good deal of layoffs this year. Seasoned people who are great at their work, and many of them have asked me, well, I have some downtime right now. What should I be learning and doing? And my advice to all of them has been the same, which is, and it's the work that I did when I left my job as a CEO and said, hey, I want to spend the next 6 months doing this. Is to think about your life's work or the thing that you really have expertise at, and imagine you were building it from scratch today, that area. So let's say you're an innovation leader and always have been, or you're a marketing leader, or you're a mid-level marketer, and you were joining a company where it was your job to build this functional area that never existed before, marketing, or this functional area of innovation or sales or whatever it might be, and you're building it now through an AI native lens. What would you do differently? Allow yourself to think from scratch, to think completely as a beginner in that, using what you know of great human work and your human judgment, but thinking about it in a whole new way. And I would say if you have learning gaps, like things you need to know about AI to answer that question, that's where your learning should focus, so that you can apply it to your own ideas and thinking about what might change.
Create special memories this Easter with the ones you hold dear. Find sweet ways to celebrate, like sharing baskets full of tasty treats. No matter what, time together is the best gift of all. And besides working with the different large language models, are you educating it on you to make it more effective and productive for you? Or are the materials you're uploading to it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have dedicated projects and workspaces where I'm leaving knowledge that is reusable to me as I move forward. And when I tackle a
Do you have a set of prompts that you store that you use for
well,
different
I
things?
was going to say, and I actually keep them separately in Google Docs. But I have, when I've tackled a particular hard process and have been successful at finally getting the output that I want, because by the way, I don't think, at least in my experience in generative AI, there's never been a response that is the final response from my perspective. So, but in that model, keeping notes on what's working and what's not working. I will say for Board of Innovation and the work that we do with clients, when we're standing up pilots or proofs of concept, often we're developing very, very complex prompts to make systems do what we need them to do before we're building out full agentic capabilities where agents will do that work. So there's a lot of very deep prompt engineering, revisioning, tweaking, and playing with output when we're building like bespoke capabilities in that area.
In the area where you have deep expertise around marketing, I heard anecdotally that McDonald's re-engineered their creative function and saved an enormous amount of money year over year by on terms of money they spent with creative agencies by AI-ifying the whole function. The magnitude of it I heard was just enormous, almost too good to be true. But are you seeing people save a lot of money and increase their outputs by AI-ifying their creative processes?
I spoke at the ANA's conference in the spring. That was a marketing conference, and a lot of CMOs got on the stage, and people are pretty private about what they're doing in
Mm-hmm.
AI. They don't share that much, but people were talking about the efficiencies that they gained, whether that was reducing customer support or having their ad agency expenditures or whatever it might be, or consumer insights, like doing things much more quickly and more affordably. I do think there's a lot of people talking about those kind of efficiency plays. Personally, they make me very nervous, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to live in a world that's filled with very similar looking creativity across the boards. I do think, back to our earlier conversation about how do you get your brand preferred by a machine, a lot of it is the trust signals that you're sending. And I would still believe that judgment, and there's a human piece of this that is going to be important in that mix. And the more and more AI generated content there is, the more it's going to look the same and the less distinctiveness there's going to be. So I think there are places where AI really belongs in a creative process that
Mm-hmm.
really probably makes a lot of sense and will allow will democratize access to a lot of different aspects of the creative process. But the idea of eliminating, humans and the full creative department and gaining these efficiencies that allow us to produce content at scale that's going to overwhelm all the people out in the world, I, I don't know. I still think there's going to be a lot of backlash on that in terms of people craving, as there's more and more AI generated content out there. I think you're going to see a pendulum swing with people craving more and more real human interaction.
Always happens, doesn't it? Pendulum
Yeah,
always swings
yeah,
back.
I think it will. And so I'm sure there are a lot of companies who are doing really good work. The ones that are leaning into what they're already great at and applying AI to make what they're great at even better, I think is probably the best thing versus people who are, again, looking at efficiency and saying, how do I replace the humans on my team?
Well, I just saw an example in our shop at one of our great brands, Harry and David. They have this wonderful food gift business and the ultimate vertically integrated company. And we do all our own photography in house. There, we have a big photography studio. And this season, one of our popular gift baskets, they decided to change the trim on it from a green and red to an all red trim. Well, that required a whole new photo shoot, and that's tens of thousands of dollars. And we all stood there and said, "Wait a minute, how is that possible in this day and age?" And there, if you have if you have the imagery, all you have to do is change the ribbon.
No, and I think in that instance, one of the best campaigns that I always cite and talk about, and it actually is a couple years old, which is kind of interesting that it was an early one. And I honestly, people ask me all the time, what are the best campaigns you've seen out there that are leveraging AI? The ones that I think are really interesting, and I'll mention this one, was done by Pedigree Dog Food. And their mission as a company has always been about I guess, adopting dogs, shelter animals. And they created a campaign in Australia, I believe it was, where they used AI to turn photos of sheltered dogs that are at shelters into more, not changing the dog, but making the photo look like a good photo and doing it on billboards with in geographic areas where that dog was adoptable. And then there's a QR code, you can scan it, you can see the dog. As soon as that dog is adopted, it's replaced by another dog in the same area. And this is just, to me, a great example of leaning into the transformative capability of AI.
So a year from now, do I still want to be a copywriter?
Have you used generative AI to write copy?
I
Do you love?
haven't.
You haven't. Um, I would say my feeling is you get a lot of the same ideas over and over again.
Hmm.
So I still think we need people, humans, to have ideas. Um, we might be able to have really good output of, can you take my idea now and execute across every platform for me?
Hmm.
Give me 5 versions of that, give it to me in 20 languages. I definitely think that's going to be the case. But
Sure.
I really do think, and because I'm, like I said, because I'm also working in marketing, um, I find a lot of very mediocre writing coming in creativity. Does it mean that there aren't people getting better results out of their relationship with AI? There probably are.
Mhm.
And I'm sure there's a lot of copywriters who are using it to get to new ideas and new territories. But I think it belongs in the process, not to replace the human process.
Well, I find by using uh, a chat GPT, for example, I no longer start with an empty page. I just start talking to it about what I'm thinking about, what I want to do, and it just helps me to get down the path faster.
Right. And I think if you were a copywriter, like often the way I'll start a creative process that's going to have AI in it is that exactly what you're doing. I'm riffing on my ideas. I know what the strategy is. I've written the brief myself, right? I've got ideas, but I want to help shape them. I want to iterate. I need a collaborator in that process. I think a lot of solo entrepreneurs have collaborators that they wouldn't have in the process. And that I always think it's good to have, um, discourse around ideas. So I think that's true. But if it's purely, I will say a lot of the platforms, Meta in particular, has turned on a lot of AI automations on their advertising platform. And I keep flagging and screenshotting crap that I would never have written in a caption on an ad that they have put together. That to me doesn't make sense, is not going to help sell my product, and is not what I want to say, even though theoretically it has been informed, it knows, it has all the guardrails and guidelines. So I don't think we're there yet with fully autonomous copywriting.
You know, we get used to things so fast. I was out in LA earlier this year and used Waymo, and it's so freaky. But by the end of that week, it wasn't so strange anymore.
I was in Austin at a biohacking conference.
Of course, you were.
You want to go understand, well, for a brand, not for myself personally. And I mean, fascinating group of people, I will say, who are interested in biohacking. You've never seen a group of more buff middle-aged people in your life,
Is that right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, these are people who want longevity.
Yep.
They really want to hack their way through death. I don't know, they want to cheat death. But anyway, so I was at this biohacking conference. It's filled with all these like interesting technologies and then maybe some really out there technologies.
It was very much so. And now that they're allowed on highways, I haven't experienced that. But I was riding in a friend's car who in a Tesla down in Orlando, and he put it on auto mode, and it's doing 60 miles an hour down the road and exited. And he never touched the wheel, the brake, the gas, or anything. And I was paying attention.
You're like, I'm not sure I trust my friend. I mean, obviously we have to trust those machines, like they have to be built in a really good way or we're in trouble. But yeah.
In the world that you're working in, advising
Yeah.
Fortune 500 companies with half your bandwidth, the other half maybe in your own activities, tell me a couple of things that you're watching this year that you think are be important benchmarks for how this all uncovers.
Yeah, I think, well, I guess one of them we've touched on already, which is this idea of the growth model in marketing really changing and people really, we spent years and years and years standing up in large companies insight practices, right? Consumer insight practices. And now we need agent insight in the same way we had human insight, right? So I think we're going to see some really big changes to how people learn and discover and choose. And that's going to have really dramatic implications across all of marketing in
But
many
not just
ways.
marketing. What does it
Yeah.
do to the education system?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, this is like one of those pro and con kind of conversations. Yeah, I could see great upside and great downside. And I'll say first in the workplace, one of my biggest concerns in the workplace, and you might have heard me say this at the Techonomy conference, is that if we are automating a lot of the more grunt work in business, we're taking away the learning process from junior level
Entry
employees.
level jobs.
And entry level jobs. But even the fact is, we're going to expect people who are middle managers and senior managers to have judgment, but we're taking away the tasks that we all learn judgment doing. Like
Mhm.
the reason I got good at my work, my early work in brand strategy and all that is because I got to read hours and hours of focus group transcripts and find an insight, hand tab what people were saying. I got to see people stand up in meetings and make mistakes and blunder and have to recover. I got to see hard decisions being made in rooms. And I feel like we've taken away in-person work from a lot of young people, so they're not learning by example, and then
It's a
we're taking away
disaster.
grunt work. And so I think that we may have a whole generation, and I have children in this generation of young workers. We may have an entire generation that's missing out on critical learning that creates judgment. And one of the big questions that I ask myself a lot, Jim, is we've talked about how do we learn to make decisions in life in general, right? And a lot of the ways we do when you think about childhood is you make a lot of small decisions, and that helps you learn how to make bigger decisions, right?
Hmm.
Choosing which t-shirt I wear at age 5 might not be the biggest decision in life, but when I'm 15 and I have to make a bigger choice, or I'm 30 and I'm in workplace, these things build on themselves and
Yes.
become like the tenets of who we are as humans and how we decide and choose. If we take a lot of that away, and we don't learn how to do that, what does the future look like? Like, what is that replaced with? And I don't know the answer.
You touched on one of those when you were an entry level worker and you were studying hours and hours of focus group research and transcripts. That same focus group now is a synthetic audience, cost you 5% of what it used to cost you to run a focus group, and you have the answer in an hour.
Right. And it might be an okay answer. It might not be a great answer, Jim. You know, I I think there's
I'm sure your clients are all working with synthetic audiences.
yeah, absolutely. In addition, and standing up alongside some traditional
Is that right? Yeah.
human, oh, sure. Like a lot of, I would say, the work over the last few years is definitely helping create knowledge, fast-moving knowledge based on data of years and years of good human insight. The truth is, a lot of larger companies, the reason they can do synthetic research is because they actually have a lot of good human research that they can train on. That's not the case for every type of
Sure.
organization and company, but I think, yeah, I'm not against that work, but I think there's also what's the role of real humans in the mix on that, and how do you do both? So, I mean, I'm working with a client right now where we're about to stand up an AI native insight phase that's running alongside their really traditional insight work, the way they've done it,
Yeah.
simply to help see, were we able to get anywhere? Were we able to connect the dots that we couldn't? Like, one of the things that I'd love to do is to like go back. I'd love to go backwards. Like, I'd love to go to your company's archives and say, hey, let's look at the focus group recordings from 10 years ago,
Uh-huh.
and let's look at the report that came out of them. Now let's find a way to take that same recording and see if we could get
Chat
to
GPT analysis
same,
of it.
better, or different insight
That
from
would
that.
be really interesting.
Because that's the question, right? Like, because I will say, having worked as a brand strategist for many, many years, I don't think there's a lot of people who are great at articulating a human insight. And
Well, who is it? Steve Jobs said
yeah,
no focus group could have ever suggested to him the iPhone because
yeah,
they couldn't suggest something that never existed before.
right, exactly.
And
And
I
and a
always
lot of
thought
this
with
is,
focus
yeah,
groups, there was so much prejudice in the interpretation
yeah.
that I never felt comfortable relying on it.
No, and I love learning at scale. Like, one of the things that I was an early innovator in 15 years ago was developing online focus groups that allowed us to go beyond 10 people in a room, to have every brand discussion be 100 people in the room from around the country, real live people at that time. They weren't synthetic. And we were able to get to insights that we could scale. Why could they scale? Because we weren't relying on 10 people in Minnesota after work. We were actually pressure testing those same ideas across larger and larger communities. So I'm definitely one who wants to connect the dots between statistically significant insight and data points. But I still think, like, not everyone looks at the same data and gets to something great. And I think there are people who have spent many years, myself included, of learning how to do that. I worry about people entering my field not having that same opportunity, because I actually think one of the reasons I'm really good at it is because someone, when I was very junior, made me read 100 transcripts and come back with my ideas from reading them, rather than feeding them to ChatGPT and asking it to connect the dots and give me the themes, right?
So, final question, Joe. You've been so generous with your time. I could talk to you all day. You mentioned you have young people entering the workforce that happen to be in your family. What are you telling them career-wise?
This is a tough conversation in my family in many ways. I think, look, I think we're in a really interesting time, and it's very hard to know what the right answer to that question is. And this gets back to being able to be a beginner and not really know to say, listen, we all need to future-proof our skills in some way, shape, or form. Whatever makes you deeply human, lean into that, because that will ultimately be the thing that survives, and whatever work looks like is going to be your ability to be a human and be a really good human. Because as the tech gets better and better, the only thing that you bring to the table is what makes you uniquely human. So I think that's probably the best advice. And at the same time, just really looking through the ways that you believe you could superpower your own abilities with AI rather than replace the work that you're doing, and be open-minded to those kind of ideas. My children work in fields that are definitely vulnerable right now. My oldest is an astrophysicist, and my younger son is just an attorney just out of law school. And so these are, critical times in those industries.
Indeed they are. And it was an astrophysicist I heard you mentioned early on about the innovations, the steam engine, the automobile. And Neil deGrasse was explaining with photographs how quickly change happens. It's gradual, 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 and then sudden. And he took some photographs of Fifth Avenue in New York City in the early 1900s, and it was just a sea of horses and carriages. And the reason why stoops were up high, and the reason why boots, and the big the conversations of the day were, how can they change the feed that they gave to horses so that the street wouldn't stink so bad all the time? And why they wore boots and climbed stairs into the homes, etc. And 8 years later, there wasn't a horse or a buggy to be seen. It was all automobiles. And that's how quickly change happens. It's gradual, 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 and then it's sudden. We're all waiting for that with electric automobiles. It seems to have taken a step backwards here recently with Ford and GM's announcements. But I have no doubt that that'll all of a sudden be sudden.
Yeah, I agree. Jim, I'm excited to see what happens in your business. I think there's
It's
so much
scary and it's
potential.
exciting all at the same time.
Well, if anything can benefit from hyper personalization,
Yep.
it's your category. And
Well,
so this
we're in the
this is your
category of
technology.
relationships, and
Yeah, yeah.
relationships matter every bit as much as they did before, and I'd say going forward, maybe even more so.
I think the human relationship is going to be the thing that becomes the most important. We're all going to be buried in a lot of digital experience that we don't want to participate in the future. So yeah, for sure.
Thanks, Jo McKinney from Board of Innovation. Some great dialogue. I so enjoyed your conversations at the economy on stage, and I'm so glad we had a chance to follow up with you today. We'll be back here for some more great information.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, Jo.